Beneath the surface of this acclaimed urban drama lies a treasure trove of bizarre secrets. A police drummer's unconventional score, a director who almost overlooked his perfect star, a soundtrack album with songs that never appear in the actual movie, controversial animal scenes that required special effects trickery, and a hidden connection to Quentin Tarantino's universe. Prepare to discover the strangest behind-the-scenes stories from one of 1994's most overlooked masterpieces. Fact 1. Director almost passed on perfect star. When director Boaz Yakin was casting for the lead role in Fresh, he nearly made one of the biggest mistakes in film history by passing over Sean Nelson, the young actor who would ultimately deliver one of the most powerful child performances of the 1990s. During the initial casting process, Yakin reviewed Nelson's audition tape and dismissed him, thinking the 13-year-old wasn't quite right for the complex role of Michael. Nicknamed Fresh, the character required an actor who could convey street wisdom and emotional depth far beyond his years, and Yakin initially felt Nelson didn't have what it took to carry the entire film. However, Yakin's brother stepped in and asked to take another look at all the audition tapes that had been rejected. When he watched Nelson's performance a second time, he immediately recognized something special that his brother had missed during the first viewing. The brother convinced Yakin to give Nelson another chance and reconsider his initial assessment. This time around, Yakin was completely sold on the young actor's natural ability and understated presence. The decision to cast Nelson proved to be absolutely crucial to the film's success. Nelson's performance was so authentic and compelling that he seemed to become Fresh rather than simply act the role. His natural, unforced delivery made audiences forget they were watching a performance at all. The casting choice was vindicated when Nelson won the Best Debut Performance Award at the 10th Independent Spirit Awards in 1995, and critics universally praised his extraordinary work. Without his brother's intervention, Yakin would have missed out on the perfect actor for his directorial debut, and film history might have been very different. Fact 2. Police drummer created unconventional score. When it came time to score Fresh, director Boaz Yakin made the surprising choice to hire Stuart Copeland, the legendary drummer from the iconic rock band The Police, to compose the film's music. This decision was particularly unexpected because Fresh was marketed as a hip-hop hood film set in Brooklyn during the crack epidemic of the early 1990s, and most filmmakers would have chosen a composer with strong connections to rap or urban music scenes. Instead, Yakin went with the British-American musician who had helped create some of the biggest rock hits of the 1980s alongside Sting and Andy Summers. What made Copeland's involvement even more unusual was his deliberate approach to the project, as he consciously avoided using the hip-hop sounds that audiences might have expected from a film about drug dealing in New York City's housing projects. Rather than incorporating heavy beats, rap samples, or street-inspired musical elements that were common in other urban dramas of the time, Copeland crafted a surprisingly subtle and restrained musical backdrop that focused on atmospheric textures and emotional undertones. His score used orchestral elements and unconventional instrumentation to create a haunting soundscape that complemented the film's serious themes without overwhelming the story. Copeland's approach proved to be brilliant because it allowed the raw performances and realistic street dialogue to take center stage, while the music worked quietly in the background to enhance the mood and tension. The composer's decision to go against genre expectations created a unique sonic identity for Fresh that set it apart from other films in the same category, helping to elevate the movie beyond typical hood film stereotypes and contributing to its critical acclaim and lasting impact. Fact 3. Soundtrack album contains no movie songs. One of the most bizarre marketing decisions in film history happened when RCA Records released the official soundtrack album for Fresh on August 30, 1994. The album featured an impressive lineup of hip-hop artists, including 3 songs by the Wu-Tang Clan, along with tracks from old-school legends like the Cold Crush Brothers, Whodini, and Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5. Music fans who bought the album expecting to hear the songs from the movie they had just watched were in for a major surprise when they discovered that absolutely none of these hip-hop tracks actually appeared anywhere in the film itself. This strange disconnect between the soundtrack album and the actual movie music was particularly confusing because Fresh was being marketed as a hip-hop hood film, which would normally feature the exact songs included on its official soundtrack release. Instead, moviegoers who had paid attention during the film would have noticed that Stuart Copeland's orchestral score dominated the audio experience, with very little popular music of any kind playing during scenes. The hip-hop tracks on the RCA album were essentially a separate collection of songs that had been assembled to capitalize on the film's urban themes and target audience, rather than representing the actual musical content that viewers heard in theaters. The decision created a peculiar situation where the soundtrack album and the film existed as completely separate musical experiences, despite sharing the same name and marketing campaign. Record buyers who wanted to relive their favorite musical moments from the movie found themselves with an album full of songs they had never heard before, while those who enjoyed Copland's atmospheric score had no way to purchase the music they had actually experienced during the film. Fact 4. Hidden Tarantino Universe Connection. Producer Lawrence Bender made a small but significant cameo appearance in Fresh that created an unexpected link to one of the most famous films of 1994. Bender appears briefly in the movie playing a character credited as long-haired yuppie scum, which might seem like a throwaway role until you realize that he played the exact same character with the identical name in Quentin Tarantino's Pulp Fiction, which was also released in 1994. This connection becomes even more intriguing when you consider that Bender served as producer on both films, suggesting that his character exists across multiple movie universes. The appearance of the same character in both movies implies that Fresh takes place within the expanded Tarantino cinematic universe, which includes not only films written and directed by Tarantino himself, but also projects produced by his frequent collaborators. This shared universe concept was something that Tarantino and his team were experimenting with during the mid-1990s, creating subtle connections between seemingly unrelated films through recurring characters, references, and production team members. Bender's dual role as both producer and actor in these projects demonstrates the close-knit nature of the independent film community during this era, where creative professionals often wore multiple hats and appeared in each other's movies. The fact that he chose to play the same specific character in both films rather than creating new roles suggests this was an intentional decision to link the two movies together. For sharp-eyed viewers who caught this detail, it added an extra layer of meaning to Fresh and connected the gritty Brooklyn drama to Tarantino's broader cinematic world in a way that most audiences never realized. Fact 5. Sean Nelson was only 13. When filming for Fresh began during the summer of 1993, Sean Nelson had just celebrated his 13th birthday, making him barely a teenager when he took on one of the most demanding child roles in cinema history. The character of Fresh required an actor who could convincingly portray a street-smart drug runner navigating the dangerous world of Brooklyn's crack epidemic, dealing with complex moral choices, and witnessing brutal violence that would challenge even experienced adult performers. The fact that Nelson was able to deliver such a nuanced and emotionally powerful performance at such a young age speaks to both his natural talent and the careful direction he received from Boaz Yakin. Nelson's youth becomes even more remarkable when you consider the heavy subject matter he had to handle throughout the production, including scenes involving drug deals, gun violence, and the controversial sequence where his character kills a dog. The young actor had to maintain the emotional authenticity of a character who was simultaneously innocent and worldly, vulnerable yet calculating, all while working alongside seasoned actors like Samuel L. Jackson and Giancarlo Esposito. His performance required him to carry nearly every scene in the film, with Fresh appearing in almost every frame of the nearly 2-hour movie. The casting of such a young actor in this challenging role was a calculated risk that paid off tremendously, as Nelson's authentic portrayal helped ground the film's more intense moments in believable human emotion. His age also added an extra layer of tragedy to the character's situation, emphasizing how children in these environments are forced to grow up far too quickly and make adult decisions before they're emotionally ready to handle the consequences. Fact 6. Controversial dog scene used dummy. The most disturbing and controversial scene in Fresh, where the title character hangs his pit bull Roscoe, was actually created using elaborate special effects and careful editing rather than putting any real animal in danger. Director Boaz Yakin worked closely with animal trainers and the American Humane Association to ensure that no dogs were harmed during the filming of this shocking sequence, which many viewers consider one of the most difficult scenes to watch in 1990s cinema. The entire scene was shot in multiple cuts, using different techniques to create the illusion of violence, without actually subjecting any living animal to distress. When audiences see Fresh holding up the dog and tying the leash around a metal pole, that portion was filmed with the real dog being safely supported by its trainer, with only the animal's legs visible in the frame to suggest struggling. The close-up shots showing the dog's face during the hanging sequence actually featured a carefully crafted dummy dog that had been designed to look identical to Roscoe, while all the sounds of the animal's distress were added during post-production using audio effects, rather than recordings of any real animal in pain. The production team went to extraordinary lengths to make this fake scene appear authentic, because Yaiken insisted on keeping it in the film despite strong objections from producers who worried about audience reactions. The director believed the scene was essential to show Fresh's transformation from innocent child to someone capable of making brutal decisions, and he felt that using obvious special effects would have undermined the emotional impact. The American Humane Association confirmed, after reviewing the production methods, that no animals were harmed during the creation of this controversial sequence. Fact 7. Chess advisor worked on famous film. The chess scenes in Fresh were made authentic and accurate thanks to the expertise of Bruce Pandolfini, a renowned chess teacher and author who served as the film's chess advisor. What makes Pandolfini's involvement particularly interesting is that he was the real-life inspiration for Ben Kingsley's character in the acclaimed chess drama Searching for Bobby Fischer, which had been released just 1 year earlier in 1993. This means that audiences watching Fresh were seeing chess advice and strategies developed by the same person who had inspired one of cinema's most memorable chess mentor characters. Pandolfini brought decades of experience as a chess instructor and author to the production, ensuring that all the chess moves, strategies, and dialogue between Fresh and his father Sam were completely realistic and technically sound. His involvement was crucial because chess serves as the central metaphor throughout the entire film, with Fresh applying the strategic thinking and tactical lessons he learns from his father to navigate the dangerous world of drug dealing and street violence that surrounds his daily life. The connection between Fresh and Searching for Bobby Fischer goes beyond just sharing the same chess consultant, as both films feature scenes of speed chess being played in Washington Square Park in New York City, and both explore the relationship between chess strategy and life lessons. Pandolfini's expertise helped create the authentic atmosphere of competitive street chess that was essential to both movies, and his real-world knowledge of how chess masters think and teach provided the foundation for the philosophical conversations between Fresh and Sam that drive much of the film's emotional core and thematic development. Fact 8. 3.5 million budget, European funding. Fresh was made with a production budget of $3.5 million, which was entirely funded by Lumiere Pictures, a Paris-based film company, rather than any American studio or distributor. This unusual funding arrangement came about because producer Lawrence Bender had a very specific theory about how American audiences and financiers would react to the film's complex and morally ambiguous story. Bender believed that American investors and studio executives wouldn't be able to understand or appreciate what Fresh was trying to accomplish until they could see the finished product, so he decided to look overseas for backing instead of trying to convince skeptical Hollywood decision-makers. Bender's success with Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs had given him credibility in the international film market, which helped him secure the full budget from the French company. He argued that Fresh was very much an auteur film that didn't follow typical commercial formulas, and he knew that the story's bittersweet ending and challenging subject matter would be difficult to explain in a pitch meeting. The European approach to filmmaking was generally more open to artistic projects that didn't fit neatly into established genre categories, making Lumiere Pictures a more natural fit for this type of unconventional urban drama. The strategy proved to be brilliant, as American distributors became very interested in the project once Fresh started shooting and generating buzz. By the time the movie premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, it already had Miramax lined up as its American distributor, proving that Bender's instincts about timing and presentation had been absolutely correct. The European funding allowed director Boaz Yaiken to maintain complete creative control over his vision without interference from nervous American executives. Fact 9. Roger Ebert's Cannes revelation. Legendary film critic Roger Ebert had a remarkable moment of discovery when he watched Fresh at the 1994 Cannes Film Festival that completely changed his understanding of how brilliantly the screenplay was constructed. During his first viewing of the film, Ebert thought he was simply listening to chess advice when Samuel L. Jackson's character Sam gave strategic lessons to his son Fresh during their games in Washington Square Park. The dialogue seemed like typical father-son bonding moments where an older man passes down wisdom about the game of chess to help his young protege improve his skills on the board. However, when Ebert watched the movie a second time at the festival, he suddenly realized that these seemingly innocent chess lessons were actually predicting and outlining the exact strategy that Fresh would use to manipulate the drug dealers and orchestrate his elaborate plan for escape. Every piece of advice that Sam gives about chess tactics, sacrificing pieces, and thinking several moves ahead directly corresponds to specific actions that Fresh takes later in the film when he sets the rival drug gangs against each other. This discovery revealed the incredible depth of Boaz Yakin's screenplay, which had embedded the entire plot structure within what appeared to be casual conversations about chess strategy. Ebert's realization showed that the film was operating on multiple levels simultaneously, with the chess metaphor serving as both a literal bonding activity between father and son and a detailed blueprint for the complex scheme that drives the movie's climax. The critic's experience demonstrates how carefully crafted the script was, rewarding viewers who paid close attention to seemingly minor details with a much richer understanding of the story's intricate construction. Fact 10. Director's Hollywood exile backstory. Before making Fresh, director Boaz Yakin had worked as a screenwriter in Hollywood, where he wrote formulaic action movies including The Rookie, which starred Clint Eastwood, and followed typical commercial thriller formulas. Despite finding success in the studio system, Yakin became increasingly frustrated and disillusioned with the creative limitations and commercial pressures that came with writing mainstream Hollywood productions. He felt that the need to satisfy studio executives and appeal to mass audiences was preventing him from telling the stories he really wanted to tell and exploring more meaningful themes through his work. This frustration eventually led Yakin to make a dramatic decision that would completely change the direction of his career. He left Hollywood behind and moved to Paris, where he began working on a novel and deliberately distanced himself from the American film industry. During his time in France, Yakin made a personal vow that he would only return to movie-making when he had complete creative control over a project and could tell a story that truly mattered to him rather than simply fulfilling the commercial requirements of studio executives. When his old friend Lawrence Bender, fresh off his success producing Reservoir Dogs, approached Yakin about developing a new film project, the timing was perfect for Yakin to make his directorial debut on his own terms. Fresh became the vehicle for Yakin to return to American cinema, with the artistic freedom and creative control he had been seeking. The experience of writing formulaic action movies had taught him what he didn't want to do as a filmmaker, and his self-imposed exile in Paris had given him the perspective and determination to create something genuinely original and personally meaningful. Fact 11. Matt Lauer hosted Behind the Scenes special. During the early summer of 1994, Cinemax aired a special behind-the-scenes featurette about Fresh as part of their Beyond the Screen series, which was hosted by Matt Lauer, who at the time was several years away from becoming the famous co-anchor of NBC's Today Show. This timing makes the featurette particularly interesting from a historical perspective, as viewers were watching a future television icon during his earlier career when he was working as a cable television host rather than the major network morning show personality he would later become. The Beyond the Screen program gave audiences an inside look at the making of Fresh, featuring interviews with the cast and crew along with behind-the-scenes footage from the Brooklyn filming locations. Lauer's role as host involved introducing different segments of the featurette and conducting interviews with key people involved in the production, providing viewers with insights into how this acclaimed independent film was created on a relatively small budget in the challenging urban environments where the story takes place. The existence of this Cinemax special demonstrates how much attention Fresh was receiving from the entertainment industry even before its wide theatrical release, as premium cable networks were already investing in promotional content to showcase the film to their subscribers. The featurette served as both a marketing tool for the movie and a genuine documentary look at independent filmmaking during the early 1990s, with Lauer providing the professional hosting skills that would later make him one of the most recognizable faces in American morning television. Fact 12. Extreme limited release strategy. Fresh received one of the most cautious theatrical releases in movie history when it opened on August 24, 1994 on just 4 screens across the entire United States, which was an extremely unusual distribution strategy for a film that had won the Filmmakers' Trophy at the Sundance Film Festival. Most Sundance winners receive much wider initial releases to capitalize on the festival buzz and critical acclaim, but the distributors at Miramax decided to test audience reactions very carefully before committing to a broader rollout of this challenging urban drama. The ultra-limited opening allowed the studio to gauge how general audiences would respond to the film's intense subject matter and controversial scenes, including the disturbing animal violence and the morally complex ending, where a 12-year-old orchestrates deadly confrontations between rival drug dealers. After monitoring the box office performance and audience reactions during this initial 4-screen run, the distributors felt confident enough to expand the release on September 2nd to 411 theaters nationwide, which represented a massive jump from the original 4 locations. This cautious approach proved to be successful, as Fresh moved up to 11th place at the United States box office during its 4-day Labor Day weekend expansion, earning $2.9 million, and demonstrating that audiences were ready for this type of sophisticated independent filmmaking. The gradual release strategy reflected the industry's uncertainty about how to market a film that defied easy categorization, combining elements of urban drama, thriller, and coming-of-age story, while dealing with extremely mature themes that made it difficult to position for mainstream audiences. Fact 13. Dog-fighting scene used playing dogs. The disturbing dog-fighting sequence that appears in Fresh was created using 2 friendly pit bulls, one male and one female, who were actually friends and were simply playing with each other during filming, rather than engaging in any real violence or aggression. The production team worked carefully with professional animal trainers to ensure that what audiences see on screen as a brutal fight between 2 vicious animals was actually just normal, harmless play behavior between 2 dogs who knew and trusted each other completely. The illusion of violence was achieved through careful camera work and editing techniques that captured the dogs wrestling and putting their mouths on each other in ways that looked aggressive to viewers but were completely natural and safe play activities. The filmmakers shot the sequence in multiple cuts and angles to create the impression of a prolonged and violent confrontation, when in reality the dogs were never in any danger or distress during the filming process. All of the aggressive sounds that make the scene so disturbing to watch, including the growling, snarling, and sounds of impact, were added during post-production using audio effects rather than recordings of actual animal fighting. This technique allowed the filmmakers to create the emotional impact and realism they needed for the story, while ensuring that no animals were harmed or traumatized during production. The scene where one dog appears to kill the other was accomplished using a dummy dog for the final moments, similar to the techniques used in the later hanging sequence. The American Humane Association confirmed that these methods successfully protected the animals while creating the realistic but disturbing footage that the story required. Fact 14. French co-production for American Story. Fresh carries the official designation of a French-American co-production, which creates a fascinating contrast, considering that every single aspect of the film is thoroughly American, from its Brooklyn shooting locations to its entirely American cast and crew. The movie tells a distinctly American story about life in New York City's housing projects during the crack epidemic, features dialogue in American English with street slang specific to Brooklyn neighborhoods, and explores social issues that are uniquely tied to American urban experiences of the early 1990s. This unusual international classification exists purely because of the film's financing structure, as the entire $3.5 million budget came from Lumiere Pictures, a Paris-based production company, rather than any American studio or investor. The French funding made Fresh technically qualify as a co-production between the United States and France under international film financing regulations, even though no French creative personnel were involved in making the movie and no scenes were filmed outside of New York. The co-production status reflects the increasingly global nature of independent film financing during the 1990s, when American filmmakers often had to look overseas for funding when domestic studios were reluctant to back challenging or unconventional projects. This arrangement allowed director Boaz Yakin to maintain complete creative control over his vision while securing the budget needed to tell his story authentically on location in Brooklyn. The French backing also demonstrates how European film financiers were often more willing to support artistic projects that didn't fit into traditional commercial categories, even when those projects dealt with specifically American cultural and social issues. Fact 15. Samuel L. Jackson's career crossroads. 1994 was a pivotal year for Samuel L. Jackson's career, as he filmed both Fresh and Pulp Fiction during the same period, working with producer Lawrence Bender on both projects, and creating 2 completely different characters that would showcase his incredible range as an actor. In Fresh, Jackson plays Sam, a gentle but troubled alcoholic father who lives in a trailer and supports himself by hustling chess games in Washington Square Park while trying to pass on life wisdom to his estranged son through strategic lessons about the game. This caring, vulnerable portrayal stands in stark contrast to his iconic role as Jules Winfield in Pulp Fiction, the philosophical hitman who delivers memorable monologues while committing acts of violence and using profanity that became legendary in cinema history. The timing of these two performances demonstrates Jackson's remarkable ability to inhabit completely different types of characters, moving seamlessly between the quiet, introspective chess master who speaks in measured tones about strategy and sacrifice, and the explosive, quotable gangster who became one of the most memorable characters in Quentin Tarantino's crime epic. Having the same producer, Lawrence Bender, involved in both films created an interesting professional connection between these two very different projects, and Jackson's work in both movies helped establish him as one of the most versatile actors of his generation. While Pulp Fiction would make Jackson a household name and earn him an Academy Award nomination, his understated performance in Fresh showed critics and audiences that he could handle dramatic, emotional roles with equal skill, proving that his talent extended far beyond the charismatic tough guy characters that would dominate much of his later career.